At 52, I felt alive again. I had always known there was something about black men that stirred something deep inside me. Maybe it was the way they carried themselves, the quiet confidence, the rich timbre of their voices, the way their hands looked so strong, capable of building worlds, yet tender enough to hold a woman's heart for years. For years, I buried that longing, tucking it away behind polite smiles and Sunday dinners. I played my part, the devoted wife, the perfect neighbor, the woman who had everything a person could want. But beneath it all, there was a fire, restless ache I dared not name, not even to myself. Robert, my husband, was a good man, solid, dependable, the kind of man who believed in working hard, saving money and mowing the lawn every Saturday morning like clockwork. We had a good life in our little Texas town, the kind of life that looks perfect from the outside: neat lawns, friendly waves, potlucks at the church hall. But at night, lying next to Robert, I often felt more like a ghost than a wife. Then he moved in across the street. The old Miller house had been empty for nearly a year, and when he arrived, he seemed to fill the space with a presence I couldn't ignore. His name was Darius Carter. Tall, broad-shouldered, his skin gleaming like deep bronze under the Texas sun. The first time I saw him shirtless, washing his car on a scorching July afternoon, something inside me shifted. It was as if a long-forgotten part of me cracked open, gasping for air. Right then, I knew my life was about to change forever. If you've ever felt a hidden fire inside you, longing you thought you'd buried long ago, stay with me. Because what happened next isn't just a story, it's a reminder that sometimes the life we think we've built can crumble in the blink of an eye. If you're ready for a story that stirs your heart and challenges your soul, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There's so much more to come. The day we truly met, the heat was unforgiving. It was one of those Texas afternoons where the air feels thick enough to drink and the sun beats down so hard you can hear the cicadas scream. I had promised myself I'd stay inside. But fate, perhaps something stronger, pulled me to the front porch. There he was, again, Darius Carter. Bare-chested, sweat glistening across his broad shoulders as he leaned over the hood of his truck, muscles flexing with every slow, deliberate movement. I stood there a moment longer than I should have, watching him. I told myself it was innocent, just neighborly curiosity, nothing more. But my heart thudded wildly against my ribs, betraying me. It summoned a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I walked down the steps, crossing the narrow strip of grass between our houses. "Hey there," I called, trying to keep my voice as light and casual as I could. He looked up, and for a moment the world narrowed to nothing but the space between his dark eyes and mine. "Well, hello," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, a slow, dangerous smile playing on his lips. "You must be my neighbor." His voice was deep, rich, and velvety, humming in the heavy air between us. I tucked a strand of hair behind my knee, suddenly aware of how my sundress clung to my skin, damp from the heat. "Emily Parker," I said, offering my hand. He took it in his large, warm, calloused one and held it just a fraction longer than necessary. "Darius Carter," said, and the way he said my name, slow, deliberate, made the base of my spine tingle. For a moment, we stood there, locked in some unspoken understanding, the kind that says everything without needing to say a word. Everything without a single word by and guttered. I should have stepped back. Feeny should have made an excuse, hurried inside, locked the door, but instead I smiled, and God helped me. I stayed after that first meeting. It was like Dunniverse kept conspiring to throw yous together everywhere. I turned their hues. Some days I found him working on his truck, his shirt peeled off, jeans riding low on his hips. Other times he was out in the yard watering the patchy grass wheat, making his skin glisten in the harsh Texas sun. And me, I found reasons ridiculous, flimsy excuses to be outside watering my hydrangeas, even though the ground was already soaked, checking the mailbox 3 times a day, even when it knew it was empty, walking my old Labrador around the block, even when the heat was thick enough to choke on anything just to catch a glimpse of zombies. it was just a nod, a half-smileyother. Times it was more a brush-offingers when he handed me a drop-in-wepper. A lingering glance that felt like it stripped me bare under misandress once, as I rounded the corner of me driveway, lost in thought. I nearly collated with him, hidden his hands caught. My arms large, firm, steadying me before I could stumble, careful there, Emily, he said, his voice low, almost dazing. I looked up into his eyes, deep, dark, endless, and for one, breathless conned. Neither of us moved. His hand stayed on me a moment longer, than accessory. The heat of his palms, searing through the thin fabric of my blouse, could feel my pulse thrumming and my ears feel the flush crawling up my neck. Mumbled something I don't even remember, wet, and hurried back into the house, heart hammering, knees weak. That night, laying in bed next to Robert, I still felt phantom imprint of Darius's hands on my arms, still heard the low rumble of his voice in my ear, and for the first time in years I closed my eyes and smiled. Robert had barely pulled out off the driveway when the wave of excitement washed over me. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't fear, it was hunger, the kind of hunger that had lived buried inside me for far too long. I stepped outside, pretending to check the mailbox, even though there was nothing there. And there he was, Darius, bare-chested once again, washing hysteric water dripping down the ridges of his muscles, glinting in the golden lights. If he had been waiting for me, need a hand with that. I called out, my voice catching just slightly in my throat, "Helloot." "Up that dangerous smile, curling his lips, you offering?" he said, tossing sponge into the bucket and walking toward me, water still clinging to his skin. I laughed, breathless, reckless. "I didn't think I'd be much help, you'd be surprised," he said, his voice low, wrapping around me like velvet. "You want to come in for a drink?" We both knew it wasn't about the drink, but I nodded anyway, and just like that I followed Jim inside the moment the door clicked shut. Bend us, the air between us cracklin' thick. "Electric, inevitable. You've been teasing me for days," Darius murmured, stepping closer, his hands slipping into the curve of my waist as if they huddleways belonged there. "Tell me you don't want this," he whispered against my ear. I didn't even try. Instead, I leaned into him, offering my mouth, my body, my long-starved soul. His lips crashed into mine, hot, demanding. "Palinga," gasped from deep inside me. His hands roamed my body with a reverence that felt almost sacred, tracing the forgotten curves of a woman who had waited too long to be touched like this. I clung to him, fingers digging into his back as he lifted me, effortlessly pressing me against the wall. The world spun around his colors, blurring, time dissolving into a haze of heat and sensation. Every kiss of every caress, every whisper against Miskin peeled away the years of loneliness I had tried so hard to ignore when Heffinally took me right there against the wheel, the air heavy with the scent, off sweet and longing. It wasn't just about bodies meeting, it was about souls colliding, about rediscovering parts of myself I had thought were gone forever, long after our bodies stilled, after thethermers of release faded into soft, gasping breaths. I lay in his arms, feeling more alive than I had in decayed sand. In the quiet that followed, one truth settled deep into my bones. There was no going back now. After that first night, we couldn't stop. We didn't even try ever since. We had every sliver of opportunity. We took it hungry and reckless, like two people who had been starved for too long. Sometimes it was in the shadowed corner of his living room, blinds half closed against the scorching sun. Other times it was in Mikachen, my back pressed against the cold marble counter, his hands sliding up one to my sundress. Mornings, afternoons, stolen moments in between errands. Every encounter burned hotter than the last, leaving us both breathless and trembling. Thor was no shyness anymore. No hesitation, it was run unapologetic. Darius would find me in the hallway, by the front door in Thebachard, and pull me into him like a man possessed. Every kiss was a battle webeth, surrendered to every touch. A spark thought ignited into wildfire. The first time he took me on the stairs, halfway between the first and second floor. It was so sudden, so desperate, that I barely had time to gasp before he was lifting, pressing me against the wall, claiming like I was the only thing in Thorol that mattered. We couldn't get a now of each other, even when our bodies were exhausted. When our skin waslick with sweat and our muscles atched from overuse, the hunger never faded, a phony thing. It grew sharper, more dangerous and through it all, the thrill of secrecy wrapped around us like a second skin, thick knowledge that just across the street Trobert was none the wiser, the perfectest band in the perfect house completely nowhere that his wife was losing herself more and more every day. I should have felt guilt, I should have felt shamey instead. All I felt was alive, more a leave-a-thon I had. In my entire life after that first night, we couldn't stop. We didn't even try every chance we had, every sliver of opportunity. We took it hungry and reckless, like to people who had been starved for too long. Sometimes it was in the shadowed corner of his living room, the blinds half closed against the scorching sun. Other times it was in Mikakun, my back pressed against the cold marble counter, his hands sliding up under my sundress, mornings, afternoons, stolen moments, in between errands. Every encounter burned hotter than the last, leaving us both breathless and trembling. Thor was no shyness anymore. No, it was Sravan apologic. Darius would find me in Thehawe, by the front door in Thebacure, and pull me into him like a man possessed. Every kiss was a battle webath surrendered to, every touch of spark thought ignited into wildfire. The first time he took me on the stairs, halfway between the first and second floor, it was so sudden, so desperate, that I barely had time to gasp before he was lifting, pressing me against the wall, claiming like I was the only thing enthralled that mattered. We couldn't get an O of each other, even when our bodies were exhausted, when our skin waslick with sweat and our muscles atched from overuse. The hunger never faded. I faded. It grew sharper, more dangerous, and through it all, the thrill of secrecy wrapped around us like a second skin, thick knowledge that just across the street Robert was none the wiser, the perfectest band in the perfect house completely nowhere that his wife was losing herself more and more every day. I should have felt guilt. I should have felt shame instead. All felt was alive, more a live-a-thon I had in my entire life. It started with a whisper, lying tangled together in afterglow. Darius's voice slid into me ear like silk. "Why are you still with him, Emily?" he asked, tracing lazy circles along my hip. "You deserve more." I laughed weakly, brushing off the Atuza's words stirred inside me, but hadn't let it go. "You're wasting your life." He said you could have it all: house, the money, freedom. I tornado face him, searching his eyes for a hint of a joke. But there was none. "What?" he said, his voice low and steady. "We made it happen." My heart thudded against my ribs. Fear, excitement, temptation. It was madness, Imrolanthinku. And yet a small wicked part of me whispered back, why not? Theplin wasn't just about moving Manora. It had to be smarter than that. Sutler at first. I convinced Robert Tupin, a joint credit card for emergency. I made a show of responsibility, setting up automatic payments, checking balance. Shay trusted me completely. Then came Thess, pending small at first groceries, house repairs, then bigger boutique clothes, spate treatments, weekend trips to relieve mistress. Always justifiable, always slipping under his radar. Darius taught me how to manipulate the statements. I've diverted some bills to a P.O. box he set up, delayed payments. Just enough to rack up late fees. Watch the interest rate soar. Robert barely noticed, too busy, too stressed. Every time he voiced concern, I reassured him, offered to take care of it, made him feel guilty for not trusting Maywan. The first debt notices started Erevan. I acted surprised, even cried. "It must be a mistake," I said, trembling hands holding the overdue letters. "I'll fix it, I promise." Meanwhile, behind his back, Darius and I were draining the savings account transfer by transfer, hidden beneath layers of paperwork and forged signatures. By the time Robert triaged the mortgage was 3 months overdue, that our accounts were bleeding dry. It was too late. The damage was done. I was drowning financially, emotionally. I stood at the edge of the water watching him sink. Robert didn't leave immediately at first. He tried to fly the made frantic calls to the bank, begged for extensions, maxed out his last credit card just to cover the mortgage for another month. I watched silently as he struggled day after day, the weight of Ital crushing him from the inside out. "Andy," Played my part perfectly supportive on surface, quietly urging him to may think about a fresh start somewhere else, somewhere far from the wreckage. Yeah, observe, peace, Robert. I whispered one night, my hand on his arm, my voice trembling with fake emotion. Maybe it's time to let go. He resisted at first, of course he did. But in the end, the death shame, the exhaustion broke him down. On gray morning, he packed a single suitcase. I need to go, he said hoarsely, not meeting my eyes. I can't breathe here anymore. I stood at the window as he drove away, shrinking smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror of my new life, and behind Medorius was already waiting to claim everything we'd stolen. But Parades was never built to last, not when it was built. On ruins, it started with whispers, late-night phone calls, message. He wouldn't show me nights when slipped out of bed, claiming business that couldn't wait first. I ignored it. I told myself it was nothing, just paranoia, but deep down the old sharp instinct twisted. In my gut, he's hiding something gone. Night I followed him, my heart pounded as I trailed his truck through dark, dusty streets of our little town. He parked behind a cheap motel on the edge of town. I watched frozen in the shadows as he got out, and then she appeared, young, pretty, everything I said oh be. She laughed as he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close like Hughes to hold. Oh, me. I saw him kiss her, deep, hungry, the same way he once kissed me. Gaines, our kitchen counter against the walls of our stolen home. I stood there's night air, thick and suffocating, watching the man I destroyed my life for destroy me in return, and in that moment all the lies, all the betrayals, all the blood I had spilled to build my new life came crashing down. I wasn't special, I was just another step on his way. Tosama thing, someone better. The rage in Sadim burned hotter than anything I had ever felt, and I knew this wasn't over. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. Instead, I waited silent, watching, because the house, the accounts, the papers, they were all still under my name. The next morning, while Dearest was still asleep, I changed the Oaks, called the bank, cut him off from everything. When he stumbled back to Theodore later that day, confused and furious, I met him with a cold, steady smile. It's sober, Darius. I said, you got what ya wanted, now get out. He raged, he threatened, but I stood my ground because in the end he had taught me well, trust. No one, love no one, and most of all, never let anyone hold the power to destroy ya. You left eventually, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, the same smugness wiped clean from his face. I had the house, the money, my freedom, but as istude, in the silence of my victory, staring at the empty halls of the life I had once dreamed of, I realized I had won, but I had lost everything that ever mattered. Sometimes the price of betrayal isn't just losing what you have, it's losing who you are. If this story stirred something in you, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more real, raw stories like this. There's always more to tell and more to